Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a fantastic opportunity. I've wanted to put together this Libertarian CEO panel for a long time and ask them some tough questions. When I was at Chapman University, I taught a course called the Libertarian CEO panel. We had 4 case studies, and we read these books. We read Charles Koch's book, The Secret to Success. We read John Allison's book, Leadership Crisis. We read John Mackey's book of Whole Foods, Conscious Capitalism. And last but not least, Family Fortunes by Bill Bonner. Bill is the CEO of Agora Financial. We have here 3 out of the 4. Charles Koch wanted to be here, could not be here because of a conflict. However, he is very interested in attending next year at our 10th anniversary. He is not committed to that, but we're hoping that he will do so. But we do have a great substitute. We have Jennifer Grossman, who is the former senior vice president of Dole Foods and currently the new president of the Atlas Society. So we have John Mackey of Whole Foods. We have John Allison, a former CEO of BB&T, former president of the Cato Institute, and now teaching. You're doing, who knows, all kinds of things. And Jennifer, we've introduced you, and finally Bill Bonner of Agora. So we're going to begin by asking, well, I'm first going to read to you from the final exam that I gave my students. And by the way, this class was rated the #1 class in business at Chapman University by the students. Not by the faculty, but by the students. Anyway, question number 42 from the final says, in fact, pass this along so you can all read this.
Mark, I'm not taking a final exam here.
Oh, yeah.
I left college behind a
You're
long time
taking a
ago.
final exam on this one. You'll love this. I know you weren't very good at college and you had to drop out, but we're hoping that. All right. Which of the following outrageous statements did Bill Bonner make in his book, Family Fortunes? Number 1, most charity is a waste of time and money. Most likely you'll do more harm than good. Number 2, managers tend to pay themselves far more than they are worth. I don't know if John Mackey would agree with that, but number 3, the one that relies on the talents, vision, ingenuity, and imagination of a single person is doomed to fail. Number 4, don't be a pioneer. Number 5, any business that begins to care about employee morale is lame. And number 6, college doesn't prepare students very well for real life. Very controversial statements. So before Bill Bonner justifies or responds to these crazy statements by a libertarian CEO, who, by the way, has been a very successful libertarian CEO at Agora Financial, which one of these panelists want to take on any of these statements? Are there any of these statements that you would agree with? John Mackey.
I read Bill's book, so I think he said almost all these statements.
Yeah. Yes, the answer is true. All of the above.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't agree with almost any of them. Except probably number 6. And number 2 and number 6 I agree with. So I disagree with 2 of the 6. I disagree with 4 of the 6 and agree with 2 of the 6.
Certainly number 2, how much do you make a year at Whole Foods, John?
Yeah, I don't take any compensation, but I mean, I own stock. So that completely aligns the better the company does, the better I do personally. And so I'm a very wealthy man. It's no big deal. People make a big deal out of that. It's no big deal.
Okay. So, John Allison, what's your opinion of number 5? Any business that begins to care about employee morale is lame.
It depends on the context. Yeah, I see a lot of businesses that are kind of do what I call sound good stuff, and that's not what builds employee morale. What builds employee morale is having a sense of purpose in the business, having a rational set of standards where people are justly rewarded or punished, and creating an environment where people can learn and grow and be self-fulfilled. In that context, employee morale is a good thing. But a lot of the employee morale stuff that you read is nothing. It's bromides and cliches. So I half agree with what Bill's saying, because if he's talking about what you see and hear in the press, he's right. But does it matter whether your employees are energized, have a sense of purpose, and care about their work? Of course.
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
I would add to that we need to redefine employee morale. It's not just the birthday parties, and it's not just the donuts around the coffee, but morale needs to also include health. And that's not just physical health, but mental health. And if we don't take responsibility for that in business, then we're just leaving a vacuum for government to come in, because so much productivity is lost due to obesity, due to alcoholism. So I think that, and we did that at Dole Food Company. We created programs and we actually lowered costs. So I would say, not to take issue with any of these things, but perhaps some of them need to be expanded.
Well, I mean, I think it's a ridiculous statement. Of course, you should care about employee morale. I mean, a good organization has to, I believe in the stakeholder theory, that you should be creating value consciously for your customers, for your employees, for your suppliers, for your investors, for the communities that you're part of. It's part of the reason capitalism is mistrusted and disliked, is we don't tend to adopt a philosophy, or too many business people don't adopt a philosophy that recognizes that it's a value creator and it has impacts in everything that it does. And I'm in a service business at Whole Foods Market, so our business philosophy is simple: hire the best people we can, make sure they're well trained, and then management's job is to make them happy. Because we found when team members are happy at Whole Foods Market, they serve the customers better. Happy customers results in repeat business and the business flourishing, and that makes happy investors. So by caring about employee morale, that helps our customers be more fulfilled, and that helps our investors be more fulfilled. They're all connected together.
All right, so Bill, here's your chance to repent
I'm
correct yourself if you wish.
Well, I'm not going to recant, but I think it is a matter largely of context. But our company, by the way, was voted #1 place to work in Baltimore last year over all the others, including Under Armour, which got the title before that. But when I heard that, I said, what? We don't want to be the #1 place to work. It means we're paying people too much. We're giving them too many vacations, too many freebies, too many benefits. So I called the executives together and said, our goal for next year is to be the worst place to work in Baltimore. But, you know, I'm exaggerating a bit, but, you know, you only have so much bandwidth in an organization and a person. And a business has a purpose. The business's purpose has to be defined. And typically it's measured in dollars and cents, but there is a business purpose. And you have to focus on that purpose. You don't focus on whether people have good morale, whether they're happy. I think that's totally the wrong thing to do. I don't want my employees to be happy. I want the customers to be happy. And I want the customers to be happy because these people work hard to make them happy. If they're not happy, well, that's too bad. I'm sorry, they should go somewhere else. Our business is to serve the customer, not the employee. And once we take our eyes off of that, and you see it all the time, my partner, Mark Ford, likes to say businesses either look outward or they look inward. When they look outward, they're thinking about their customers and what they're doing to serve their customers, what they're doing to earn their money. When they look inward, they're in business, just like the government, to serve themselves. And when you turn inward, everything falls apart. Then you begin to have meetings with your staff about employee morale. It's incredible. It's a total waste of time. You focus on what you're going to do, you focus on serving the customer, and that's what makes employees happy. As soon as you start focusing on yourself, and this is true in your personal lives too, as soon as you start focusing on yourself, then you become unhappy. So you focus on the business, on the customer, on servicing the customer and doing what you should do, and then everything seems to fall into place.
All right, so back to our other three panelists who I get a sense are kind of internally shaking their heads, but maybe agreeing with some things. No, John is totally shaking his head.
First of all, I mean, that kind of binary way of looking at the world
that's the way it works.
The 21st century world is far more complex than that. And I mean, if you look at the actual statistics, Google's been the #1 best company to work for, like, for the last 6 years. They also have the highest market capitalization of any stock market in the world. That's not accidental. Those are connected together. If you look at the 100 best companies to work for from Fortune over the last 20 years, if you would want to beat the market, buy the companies in the 100 best companies to work for, because those companies outperform the S&P 500 by more than 2x over the last 20 years. It's a market-beating strategy because when you have high morale, you have high productivity. So, I mean, Bill he obviously has high morale. The fact that he doesn't focus on it, I'm not sure that's true. I think he does focus on it. He's just not admitting it.
So, John Allison, isn't it true that HR is the fastest growing part of most companies these days?
It may be true, Mark.
Human resources?
But what I wanted to do was talk about what I call integration. And John Mackey and I, we have our arguments. We also fundamentally agree in principle. Let me tell you what BB&T's mission statement. Let me tell you our results. I was CEO for 20 years. Our company grew from $4.5 billion in assets to $152 billion in assets to become the 10th largest bank in the U.S. I was ranked by Harvard Business Review as one of the 100 most successful CEOs in the world based on shareholder performance. But our mission was to make the world a better place to live by helping our clients achieve economic success and financial security, by creating a place where our employees could learn, grow, and be fulfilled in their work, by making the communities where we work better places to be, and thereby optimizing long-term return for shareholders by creating a safe and sound investment. We were shareholder-focused, but shareholders are results. The way you get superior shareholder results, and we had them, was by focusing first on clients. True, you got to have happy clients, they drive the revenue. But good customer service is based on good relationship with your employees. You got to create a place where you can get better, smarter, more productive, more energized people. And you do that all within the context of your communities, not from an altruistic perspective. But if your communities don't do well, you don't do well. So the best way to run a business in the long term, first, focus on your clients, but do that through superior commitment to helping your employees be happy in that Aristotelian sense of a well-lived life. And do care about your communities, not altruistically, but because they impact your business. And that's how you reward shareholders over the long term. It's an integration.
So, Jennifer, you have the last word on this topic, then we're going to move on to another topic.
When I was at Dole Food Company, Whole Foods was one of our customers, and we had customers and we had consumers. The customers were the retail outlets. The consumers were the people that were ultimately buying the product. And I ran a nutrition institute. Some people would say, well, what's the business sense of that? And in a larger sense, you do have a relationship with your customers and also with your consumers, because things go wrong in business. There are strikes, there are natural disasters, there are food illness outbreaks. There are all kinds of things that you can't necessarily plan for. But what you can plan for is thinking about different stakeholders and thinking about the communities where you source your products, and also thinking about building trust with consumers so that when things do happen, they're not just willing to jump on whatever the media is their narrative, but they might be willing to give a company, big business, a chance. And I'll also just add one thing. In terms of the business sense of focusing on employee morale, you really need to do that when you're running a nonprofit, okay? Because a lot of times I've got volunteers here that have driven all the way across the country, other volunteers that are giving up their time. They're my biggest donors. And in that case, you really need to think about what is the value that you're providing them. And that requires empathy and some more diverse skills that you don't always think about in business.
Okay, now we're going to move to another very controversial statement that Bill Bonner made in Family Fortune. And that is, number one, most charity is a waste of time and money. Most likely you'll do more harm than good. So, John Mackey, what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, I don't agree. If you want to say some charity is a waste of time and money, then sometimes you'll do more harm than good. I think that's a true statement, but the blanket statement I think is an exaggeration. It's hyperbole, it's an exaggeration. I mean, here's the reality. If business can find a way to make a profit at something, then it belongs in the private sector. But there are many problems in our world. Let's take the work that something like the Humane Society of the United States does with animals. There's no way to effectively make a profit at that. So if we don't have the civic society step up and do social entrepreneurship and create nonprofit organizations that try to solve these problems, the only alternative is to give more and more power to the government. People need to realize that when you're arguing against charity and against nonprofits, you are unwittingly empowering the government to take over more and more control of our lives. So we need a vital civic society, because if we do, then we need less government control and intervention in our lives.
Very good. And by the way, Whole Foods does engage in a lot of corporate charity. The Whole Foods Foundation. And
10% of our profits are given to nonprofit organizations.
And you think they do more good than harm, obviously.
I mean, I don't. If we had time, I would go into some of the things Whole Foods does. Yeah, our Whole Planet Foundation is making a huge difference in the world. We've helped over 5 million poor people, entrepreneurial, all around the world. Our Whole Kids Foundation is giving salad bars and school gardens to any school in America that wants one. That's making a huge difference in children's health. Our Whole Cities Foundation, trying to give food access to food deserts, is also doing good. Business can do good in this world, and it has a responsibility to do so.
Now, John Allison, one of your heroes is Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand is famous, well, and so is Jennifer Grossman. Both of you can comment on this. Ayn Rand is famous for being somewhat considered anti-charity. She never gave much to charity herself. She didn't want to give money to beggars. There's all these stories that are out there. Did that affect your view, John Allison, at BB&T Bank, or did you feel that charity does have a purpose, a value?
On this issue, I'm pretty much in line with what John Mackey just said. Now, what Rand actually said, she's often misquoted, is that charity was secondary, that production and creation was first, and that glorifying charity was a terrible mistake, because you had to produce something before she could give it away. John has to make a profit before he can give away 10% of his profits. And I think that would be actually a very Randian position. I do think there's this truth in what Bill Bonner is saying. A lot of charity is wasteful. That is a big problem. And one area I would talk about, I'm going to talk about for this group, it stuns me how many conservatives, how many libertarians blindly give money to their universities to support programs that they are in total philosophical disagreement with.
Yeah, good point.
At BB&T, we gave to universities, but all of our university programs were totally focused. They were about creating programs to study the morality of capitalism, to objectively discuss capitalism from a moral perspective. We won the economic fight. We did that back in 1776. We're really having an ethics argument, and that capitalism is perceived as unethical. And John's right. We've got to change the image of capitalism, but our programs were to show that capitalism is an incredibly ethical system. So yes, charity can be very, very good, or it can be bad, and you need to focus your charity on something that you believe will make a difference for whatever you personally care about.
Did Dole Foods have a major charity drive?
We did not have a major foundation. We did give some local giving, but David Murdoch, who's the CEO and was the owner of Dole Food at the time, who hired me to start the Nutrition Institute, had a vision of helping people lead healthier lives. And so he directed a lot of research funding towards that, but it was a doing business as organization. But to your question, I would have 3 points. One is regarding whether or not it's a waste of time and money. And part of that has to do with the tax code. When I was the senior writer at the National Commission on Economic Growth and Tax Reform, we looked at all of the deductions, and including the housing deduction and including the charitable deduction, because if you really wanted to simplify the tax code, even these things that were meant to do good also did lead to additional complexity. Second, I would say that having been at the Cato Institute 20 years ago and then coming back, so much had changed in Washington, D.C., a lot for the better. But the think tank world where ideas or your products hadn't necessarily changed that much because they're more insulated from market forces. And so I think if you are in nonprofit, you have to be in continual beta mode and self-disrupting and prototyping what you're doing. And then finally, I would just say about Ayn Rand that from my perspective at the Atlas Society, I look at not just what she said, but what she did with her life. And she spent her entire life not necessarily giving back, but she came from communist Russia. She came over here. She could have just said nothing, put her head down, but instead she spent the rest of her life saying, they're building an ideological bomb over there, and I am going to brave any kind of criticism and ridicule and threat to my family's safety back there in order to warn people. That wasn't altruistic, that's what she wanted to do, but it was very benevolent.
Very good. So, Bill, we don't have a lot of time, but you're in the hot seat. You want to recant now your statement?
I said most charity is a waste of time. There are two kinds of charity. There's private charity. I am 100% in favor of private charity. When you meet somebody who needs help, you give them help. But when you give somebody help, you have to take responsibility for it. When you give people money, even your own children, you give them money, you are taking a big risk that their lives will be ruined by the fact that you give them money. I lived in the ghetto of Baltimore. There's probably, it's like Lagos, Nigeria there. And there, that is a place created by the federal government's welfare program. Welfare is given money, charity by the government, given to these people, and it removes the need for them to lead responsible lives. They don't have to get up in the morning, so they stay up all night. Everything, the day after the welfare checks came, this is the 1980s, was a big party. All night long, you would go with, motors racing, people drinking, yelling, guns going off and everything. Well, this was a consequence. People's lives ruined by charity. There's private charity where you take responsibility, and there's public institutional charity. And when it's institutional charity, it doesn't matter really whether it's the government or a private institution, they both act the same. They don't have the discipline of the market, of market forces, of consumers who buy things. So what do? They turn inward. They look out for themselves. They are businesses. Their goal is to raise as much money as possible and to spend it on themselves. And if you look around the great world, the most charities, that's what happens, and most charities probably do more harm than good. Of course, I don't know of any great studies in this, and my statement is a little bit sort of off the cuff, but I think it's something that you need to be aware of when you give money to institutional charities. You have to be very
and by
careful.
the way, Bill, you do give money to an institutional charity in Baltimore, do you not?
What one?
With helping the mansions in the area and stuff. I know there's a charity that you give to every year.
Oh, well, we do a lot of local stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, local stuff.
So anyway, we need to wrap this up, but John, you were shaking your head again. I presume you have some problems with what Bill had to say?
Well, if you want to say most governmental charity is a waste of time and money, well, I'm okay with that. But then he modified that by saying institutional. And that would mean, say, what a corporation does or what, I don't agree with that. I mean, I really don't. And fundamentally, I think one of the reasons capitalism has such a bad brand is that it puts itself out in the world this way. And it's very disturbing. I mean, 51% of millennials now think socialism is superior to capitalism. It's an astounding statistic. And look how they voted for Bernie. And I think we have to recognize that the way we're marketing capitalism in the world is it's not really working. And it needs to shift. And I think it's statements like this that...
You're proposing to market capitalism as socialism. Look, we're all doing, our goal in life is to do good. That's not the goal of capitalism. The goal of capitalism is to learn, to do what we do, to see how the market responds to it. We don't decide what's good. We don't know what's good. We go forward. And the disciplines of the capitalist system are what allow us to go forward and build real wealth. Institutional socialism or institutional charities, they don't do that. And if we try to pretend that we're really doing the same thing, that we care about people, we care about employee morale and so forth, all we're doing is playing the game by their rules. That's not going to work.
Well, it depends how you also define morality. If you're defining morality in terms of the greatest good for the greatest number, kind of a utilitarian argument, then I completely agree with you. But I also agree that we do need to rebrand capitalism if we want it to expand and be adopted. And part of that, though, is making the moral case for capitalism that's not dependent on outcomes and that's not dependent on religion, a secular moral case for capitalism based on individual self-ownership.
All right, John and Mackie, I'll give you the last word. John, either one.
Bill, I'm debating a Marxist at 11 o'clock up here about capitalism versus socialism.
Yeah.
So perhaps you'll then see my views. You'll find that they may not be as different from what you're. But I challenge you to debate me next year on capitalism. We can have our two versions up here.
John Allison.
I just think it's being objective about what capitalism is. The way you get superior profits is by doing a great job for your clients. You do that with your employees. You do that in the context of your communities. That's what it is. It's not that you superiorly care about your employees or your clients. It's just that in order to make a profit, you have to do those things. So you do want to make the world a better place to live, doing something you want to do for you. And so it's a balancing act, and I do think that understanding that business really is about making the world a better place to live, and that's how you get better outcomes, instead of just saying, well, we're just focused on profits. It's not good business.
The purpose of business is not to make money. My body has to produce red blood cells to live. If I stop making red blood cells, I'm going to die. It doesn't follow, therefore, that the purpose of my life is to produce red blood cells. Business is the greatest value creator in this world. It creates far more value than all the nonprofits and all the governments combined, exponentially. That's the story we have to tell. We are the value creators. Profit is a byproduct of that, earned through voluntary exchange in the marketplace. But the purpose of business is not to make money. It's not the purpose of doctors. They heal people. Teachers educate. Architects design buildings. Engineers construct things. All the professions refer back to some type of value creation in the world. And ironically, business is the greatest value creator, but for some reason, we seem to be afraid to tell that story.
Now, I don't want to pick entirely on Bill Bonner's book, but
Well, you've run out of time. You only got 2 minutes
we're run
left.
out of time. So I do want one quote and get a quick response from John Allison's book, Leadership Institute. Quote, I have never met a truly humble, successful leader. And you kind of downplay the virtue of humility, which Charles Koch highlights as one of his 10 principles of humility. So how important is humility, or should leaders be? You know, Ayn Rand put up these heroes, as capitalists as heroes, and they were pretty arrogant people. You know, Howard Roark, John Galt, they were inventors, entrepreneurs, very successful, and they were kind of proud of what they did. How do you feel about humility versus, you know, we got 1 minute, so we're running out of time.
Can I say one context, since you said it for me? My context was that it's very important that you rationally evaluate yourself. If you think you're too good, if you're arrogant, that's dangerous. If you don't know your own strengths and weaknesses, that's dangerous. So it's not about being humble, it's being about objective about what your strengths and weaknesses are and acting accordingly.
So you're in favor of a Donald Trump type of person who puts his name on it?
No, Donald Trump is way arrogant and he's way over-evaluating. That's one of his problems.
So Bill, is this something you can agree with John Allison? This quote here about humility?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think that it's really complicated because people need leaders. People respond to leaders, and they like heroes. And so the hero that Trump plays is an important feature in his whole business strategy. But I wouldn't invest in a business run by a person who thought he knew what he was doing. I would rather invest in a business run by somebody who's humble enough to realize that he was going to let the market tell him what to do. I think humility is the critical element of a good business leader. I'm totally with Charles on that.
Yeah, and Charles Koch makes the point. He says, if you're not humble, you don't listen to criticism. You say, it's my way or the highway, and it gets you into a lot of trouble. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I think this is something we could do every year. How many would like to see the Libertarian CEO panel come back? Or maybe the debate. That would be really cool. Thank you, John Mackey, John Allison, Jennifer Grossman, and Bill Bonner. And by the way, we're now taking a break. We'll be headed toward the exhibit hall. And do pick up, we brought 100 copies of Family Fortunes. You will want to read this book and see why and the context of his controversial statements. And of course, we have John Mackey's book, Conscious Capitalism, in paperback at the bookstore. I think we have Allison's book, and so on.
I'm not doing a book signing.
No, I know you're not doing a book signing, but I did want to mention that your books are available. Thank you all, and we'll see you. Come back here at, 10 o'clock?